Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Get ready to be inspired, hear success stories, and learn tips and principles for bringing out the best in everyone.
Hello, everyone. This is Debra, and this is Human Potential at Work. My guest today is Kristine Biagiotti-Bridges, and she works with Dell. And my goodness, she's got an interesting story. She has a very interesting story of, personal experiences with people with disabilities and caregiving. And she also represents Dell Corporation, and they're doing amazing things, not only including people with disabilities, being very deliberate about it, doing it from an employment perspective, being real creative with the technology, but also I love what they're doing with climate action. They're doing amazing things with climate action. And there's so many things they're doing that we can't get to it all today, but I think you're going to really enjoy this story. I actually looked at a YouTube that she sent to me right before we went on air, and I thought I was getting my Kleenex out, or my tissue, I should say. But we will make sure that we provide that link so that you also can watch it. But she has a really powerful story. So Kristine, welcome to the program.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, you have a beautiful story, and I was hoping that you might want to start with the story about your amazing daughter, Kaylee, and the Boston Marathon, and I have all kind of notes, but I'm not going to do my notes. I'm going to let you tell the story. But Kaylee's now 25 and a half years old, which is, she's like my daughter, those half. That matters. My daughter is 33, but she's still counting it. She's still counting when it's her birthday. So tell us a little bit about who you are and your family story, and then we'll get into Dell more too.
Okay. So Kayla obviously is 25 and a half, and she was born normal pregnancy. Everything was on track, but when she had her full week checkup, things just weren't quite right, and we heard a little heart murmur, so that kind of started us down our journey to figure out what was going on. We spent some time having open heart surgery as a 4-month-old, and then just weren't meeting milestones, and it took us 3 years to actually get her first diagnosis. And that involved many trips to Boston Children's Hospital, but then they actually sent us to Atlanta to Emory University, where we had a fresh muscle biopsy, which confirmed that Kayla had something called mitochondrial encephalomyopathy. And for the average person, you would think of it somewhere along the spectrum of maybe muscular dystrophy, and it was her body's inability to create enough energy to grow and develop normally. So in Kayla's case, she has, her brain isn't formed symmetrically on both sides. So she has seizures and some neurological deficits in that space, but also she's rather small at 25. She's 100 pounds, maybe 4'10". So as we've gone through this journey, the doctors have always said, there's more, there's more, there's more. And it wasn't until she was about 18 years old that the blood tests have gotten good enough where we actually did some deeper genetic testing looking at her DNA sequencing and found out that she is the 20th person in the world diagnosed with something called TRIO, and that's TRIO. And it's a defect on your 5th chromosome. But really, it explains a lot to us because some of the characteristics are on the autism spectrum, neurological differences, and intellectual disabilities in that space. So it's actually a good thing because we know that the mitochondrial disease is a secondary diagnosis, and I'm planning that Kayla will be here a lot longer than me. So her prognosis is really good now.
Good.
Over the years, when Kayla spent a lot of time at Children's Hospital, she had been inpatient for a significant period of time between her 5th and 6th years. And when we were finally discharged, the hospital came to us and said, would Kayla be interested in having somebody run the Boston Marathon in her honor? And I thought, what a great way to take a very negative experience for her and turn it into something positive where she could go and associate having fun, participating in the marathon, and making it that when we went to the hospital, we had something nice to talk about versus everything related to healthcare. So 2001 was her first year having a patient partner, and she absolutely loved it. So it started her love affair with the marathon. And over the years, what it did was it led to a greater participation on my part. And I had a group come to me and say, hey, we'll sponsor you $10,000 to donate to Children's Hospital if you run the marathon. I was not a long distance runner. I was not anybody who did any sort of endurance. And I said, all right, I'll do it next year. So I took a whole year to train. And in 2005, I ran my very first marathon. So yeah, so over the years, it led to Kayla really getting excited. Now mom's running the marathon, and she had a special relationship with her dad where they did a lot of 5Ks together and loved running. So her long-term plan in her mind was that at someday she would like to run the Boston Marathon. And hence 2013, she turned 18. I had met all the criteria that the marathon folks needed to be eligible. They let me run with Kayla. And for her 18th birthday, we ran the Boston Marathon. Unfortunately, it was the year of the bombing, but we were the second to the last officially recorded time that day, as well as the first mother-daughter team in the 117-year history of the Boston Marathon to run and finish. So we've kind of tied, you know, a lot of things along the way into getting to that point.
Yeah, it was interesting watching the video, and she's just, it's such joy for her. And as you're crossing the finish line, you start hearing, I mean, we could see it on the video. You start seeing the bombs, and she actually thought it was just, you know, more celebration that she finished, which I, you know, firecrackers or fireworks or something. But so I thought that was an interesting point that, you know, on the video, you talked a little bit about it, you know, how she didn't, and probably still doesn't really understand what was happening around her. She just thought it was celebration because they're, you know, so do you mind just exploring that a little bit?
Sure. So when we finished, obviously there was a lot of chaos and things going on. We fortunately had some friends and family that were right at the finish line that were able to take her and get her to a safe place while I went to the medical tent with Brian, my now husband. He had taken some shrapnel, and we wanted to make sure everything was okay because, you know, he had a lot of blood and stuff going on. So we had seen things that people probably shouldn't be seeing at a marathon. And they told me that he would be okay. We would just go to a local emergency room. And I said, fine, there are bigger problems to solve at that point. While we were separated, the police put Kayla in the basement of a hotel for safety with some of our family, and cell phones weren't working. I didn't know where she was. And I had an hour of panic trying to find her. But again, everybody kept that, that let's shield Kayla, you know, with what was going on. So on the way home, we made a big celebration in the car. Kayla, you just finished the Boston Marathon. This is a great, exciting day. And over the next couple of weeks, as people called and came by the house wanting to check on us, I said, please just keep it positive. You can go and talk to her and share your stories of what you saw on TV, the happiness, the joy. And if you want to talk about the other stuff, we can go in another room and you and I can talk about it. So through that, ESPN followed us for the next year after the marathon, and we had that rule. We can talk about anything you want to, but let's not do it in Kayla's presence. So it was always a big deal for her. She graduated high school that year. She ran the marathon. And so we kept everything really positive. And this is when I say I'm very thankful that she has, some intellectual disabilities, because she didn't understand the severity and impact of what was going on that day. And we really kind of, carried that through. It's always been a little mantra in our house. She was 10 when her dad passed away. And again, when people stepped up to the plate to support us, we always talked about good things, happy things with her dad, and really have kept that positive energy around her. So Kayla is a very positive young lady.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So you're a mom, you walk this ridiculous situation. And I'm so sorry her father died. I mean, wow, it's lots of contrasts in our world, but so tell us how did you get into supporting neurodiversity in Dell? Because it sounds like you have some similar, a similar path to myself. I'm blessed with my daughter with Down syndrome, and, and it wound up becoming part of my life, work and professionally.
I think I've always been, kind of a caregiver at heart. Long before I had my daughter, I had a grandmother who had multiple sclerosis, and she lived with us while I was growing up. And so I've kind of always gravitated to wanting to help people. And when her dad died, we did a lot in the community to support individuals. There's a program called Best Buddies out there, and they come into the schools, and Kayla participated in that all the time, but it wasn't in the community. It only took place in schools. So we hosted, we started hosting a 5K fundraiser to raise money, and we took that money and provided it to our local YMCA to bring those Best Buddy activities into the community so that other young people like Kayla could continue those friendships, because as we know, young people with disabilities have a hard time making friends, not understanding maybe the social norms and how to do that. So they could take what they've done in school with their buddies in school and now go to the Y and have pizza parties, go swimming, play basketball, whatever they wanted to do with those same friends, and it wouldn't cost anybody anything. And so when I joined Dell, at the time we were EMC and we merged into Dell, but we had really started doing a lot of work around supporting our employees. And I took on a leadership role as a chapter lead in Hopkinton, Massachusetts. And as we merged into Dell, we took 2 employee resource groups, put them together, and we were all very like-minded in the same things. How do we support our employees? How do we support their families? And how do we stay engaged with our community in the disability space? So after that merger, we all came together. I took over a co-lead position for our North America True Ability Employee Resource Group. And we have had the focus on how can we expand our workforce to include other people with disabilities? And we're starting small. We're looking at neurodiversity and really focused on that kind of autism spectrum, because what we see in the workforce is we can't necessarily get enough candidates in that, maybe let's say technology space. And the market's good. We need people. We want good people, and we also want people that think a little differently. And so a couple of years ago, we started the program in Hopkinton, utilizing some of our community partners to help us source these individuals, bring them in, start that process of having a 2-week cohort where they can showcase their skills and not feel anxious and overwhelmed with that kind of one-on-one interview. And we also know that these individuals may not handle social situation or social cues like we would, and we take that stress away from them. So this is our third year. We're in the process of getting ready to launch virtually at the end of September, beginning of October. But we've also expanded to Round Rock, Texas, and we've had, I think, 14 full-time hires that have come out of this. So, and these
That's cool.
are superstars.
Yeah.
They really changed the way our engineering teams think, how maybe our diversity and inclusion team promotes, just a lot of different changes, but all for the good.
I agree. And yeah, I always find that every time we're focused on disability inclusion and accessibility, everyone wins. Everyone wins. I know that my company, Tech Access, I worked with Dell, and Dell put us in a commercial, Take Your Own Path, and really focused on the work that we were doing at Tech Access to employ people with disabilities in the technology field. And I loved that this gigantic brand was supporting small woman-owned entrepreneurial businesses like mine that were making a difference. I was a social entrepreneur before I realized it, but the one reason why we were a Dell shop was because a lot of my employees, just like in my current company, Rue Global Impact, the majority of the team are people proudly with disabilities. But one thing that we were finding is just little things like this. I had multiple employees at my last firm that they couldn't use their hands, or sometimes their hands would shake, and the laptops would take spills, a lot more spills. You really shouldn't be dropping your laptops on the ground, but things happen. And we found that one thing that Dell was good at, I think Dell probably better at this than anyone else, was they actually build these laptops and these computers so they could take a spill, which, by the way, not only helps, companies like mine, but it also helps in education when you have students, because students are going to drop their thing. We all drop our technology sometimes, but just little thoughtful things like that. And also, I also commend Dell for they're doing so much work on climate action. And as we say, if we don't protect our planet, this diversity and inclusion conversations are not really going to be relevant, because, we need to live on this planet. So I see Dell being a real leader in so many ways. And I don't even know everything that you are doing, but I'm just very impressed. And I like that Dell is talking about neurodiversity. And another point I want to make, Kristine, I also think it's good with the ERG, and just for anybody that it's employee resource group is what we're referring to. And Dell has had has had there for years. And I believe, if this is still correct, Kristine, this group was for people with disabilities, people like you and I that, are parents of a child with disability or caregivers, but also any allies that wanted to come in. And I thought that was very important, because we need our allies. We need all these intersectionalities of diversity and inclusion. And so Dell was one of the first groups that I heard doing that. I know a lot of others are doing that, but why do you think, Kristine, it's so important for corporations like Dell to have these employee resource groups that are focused on different topics, but certainly focusing on making sure that people with disabilities are fully included in every aspect of that word?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One, you ask a sales guy, they're going to say it's a business imperative, because a lot of our consumers have disabilities. We age. We may get a disability as we age. I'll use vision as an example. I don't wear glasses now, but 20 years from now, I might be wearing glasses, or I might need to have some sort of accommodation on my laptop where the fonts are bigger, or, something like that. I think different groups and different interests, whether you might be, somebody who is aligned with Pride, or somebody who's aligned with a veteran, or a caregiver, for instance, people want to have an outlet where they can go and feel like they're accepted. And I think of the 13 ERGs that we have, it gives everybody an opportunity to find a group that they align with and to feel welcome and included. And then also too, I think it gives folks to have that opportunity to cross collaborate when it comes to our ERGs. There's a lot of intersectionality between not only disabilities, but you have caregivers that are caring for people with disabilities, and you have veterans who may have come back from service that now have a disability, and how do they reacclimate into the community and society. So we see a lot of cross collaboration happening between our ERGs to bring all of these folks together and maybe offer them an opportunity to get everything that they need in one place.
Right. And I also see the most successful ERGs are when the corporations listen to the ERGs. So I won't tell you who this is, but there was an example of a very large global corporation that created an ERG, but they really just, they gave the ERGs no support, or they had an executive sponsor that wasn't very interested in it, and it wound up becoming a bad situation for this corporation. This corporation had multiple really talented people leave because they got discouraged, and they thought, well, you don't really care about this thing that impacts my family. And so there can certainly be a negative, but at the same time, there can be such a positive to the corporation, because now you have a group that you can turn to and say, all right, well, when it comes to accessibility, what could we do better? When it comes to innovation, and so I see corporations that are using these ERGs to really listen to what their employees are saying and what the needs are, and learning from them. I find that they're doing the best. And I want to make one more comment. During this COVID-19, because we're still, as we record this, in the middle of this pandemic. I don't know. Are we in the middle? I don't know where we are, but we're still doing it. And so I think a lot of the efforts that corporations like Dell has made with accessibility, listening to your team from the different perspectives, the different ERG groups, those companies seem to be doing a little bit better than companies that were not making these efforts. And also we're also seeing, which I'm really thrilled with, that more people, certainly in the United States, we have more people self-identifying as having a disability than ever before, because people are realizing, as you mentioned, Kristine, with the caregiving. My husband's one of those people that has aged into a very serious disability. He was hit by a car as a child, and he has very, very advanced dementia now because of it, because traumatic brain injuries, if it's big enough, and, it's going to cause his brain to age differently. And so, do you agree that Dell benefited from the efforts at the ERGs and your accessibility and everything else when everybody was sent home to stay safe with the COVID-19?
I do. I think it's been key, because when you look at people and their ability to work remotely, I mean, we went from 0 to 60 from being in a business office place to working remotely at home. A lot of our employees have really adapted well, and being able to utilize, whether it's Microsoft Teams with the closed captioning for somebody who might have a hearing impairment or anything like that, I think it's been tremendous. And I also think too, from just thinking back to this whole conversation, when we talk about our personal journey, prior to me coming to Dell, I had always worked in small startup companies, a lot of innovation, a lot of crazy hours. I might be someplace for 3 or 4 years. I've been with Dell now over 17 years now, and never had been at a big company. It always been small startups. And for me, what has been that piece that has retained me has been the ERG, and being able to take what I'm passionate about and move forward, whether it's starting a neurodiversity program or looking at ways we can improve our cultural differences and people working together. And then you add in the fact that we are very flexible at Dell, and it has worked for my lifestyle with having to care for my daughter and my stepson, that I'm very committed to Dell. And having the opportunity to now take on a leadership role in our ERG has really expanded my professional development. It has allowed me to do a lot more in the community and outside of Dell with everything that I've learned internally. So it's been a great benefit to my career as well as to my family.
Yeah, and that's when we're loyal to our employers, that means everything. And for people that might not be familiar with the term neurodiversity, do you mind talking a little bit about what that is? Just in case the audience, I know a lot of the audience will be familiar with it, but I find that still, I don't hear that term used as much in the US as, for example, I'm hearing it used in the United Kingdom. They're using that word a lot, but I still don't hear it as much. So do you mind elaborating?
Yes, so we look at it as kind of like an umbrella of people that may be on the autism spectrum. It might be individuals that have an intellectual disability, maybe somebody, like you said, who's may had a stroke or a brain injury, but it's all the way our brain is wired and what's that impact to how we think. So I think it covers a lot of different things, as well as even like ADHD or dyslexia. A lot of different things fall into that category. So it's very inclusive to brain related, I guess, diagnosis or condition. And but again, anybody who thinks differently are neurodiverse.
I agree, and I think I'm a neurodiverse person. I have ADHD. Because of the ADHD, I struggle with depression, and boy, this time, it's intense these times, and dyslexia as well. And I think that in the future, society is going to understand that when people have ADHD or dyslexia, it doesn't mean that our brains are broken. It just means that we learn differently, and we should be educated differently instead of the way I was educated. If you say one more word, I was always a little chatty, but I didn't really get a lot of good education because, once again, they also weren't at the time. I'm 60 now, so at the time they weren't really identifying this. Certainly in girls, girls were not being identified. So we've learned a lot of societies, but I think once again, deciding that people can't add value to society and to our workforces because they're neurodiverse is ridiculous. You made a really good point, Kristine, that I wanted just explore just a minute, because what we are finding over and over and over again, and this, by the way, ties into artificial intelligence and data we're gathering from them, but the innovation that we see, the creativeness, the productivity of teams that are diverse, that includes neurodiversity, we're seeing that we're seeing better products, we're seeing better teamwork, more innovation coming, and there's great benefits to corporations and society, certainly, because you're making such efforts to truly include everyone. And I had a little note here, but I also wanted you to talk a little bit, because I know this is something that's important to Dell, and I'm gonna look at my notes, about sort of the sandwich generation, the medically complex autism, caring for yourself, benefits, mental health, all those different moving parts. There's just so much, there's a lot of nuances, and it's because we are talking about humans, and not that they're broken or normal or abnormal. We're talking about human beings. And sometimes, as you know, often as we age, more and more of us acquire disabilities, and it's not, oh, you're going to get, it's more about, it's just part of the human experience. And why don't we just celebrate those? But I was wondering if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about how Dell's thinking about those things.
And this was great, because when you mentioned depression, the bell went off in my head that, again, mental health kind of falls into that neurodiversity, and it's always been a stigma when we have those conversations. And so for the last 2 years, our True Ability ERG has really worked to continue those conversations and bring it to the forefront. And I always use the example, I could have been that mom that came back to work after having a baby and had postpartum. Who do you have that conversation with? And so we wanted to take, tangible things that maybe our middle managers could understand and say, hey, look at, this happened to Susie, or, you might have other individuals that have significant mental health issues, but do you see them as very committed employees, very, very focused on their jobs. They do a great job. So that stigma shouldn't be there. And so we've been having these conversations. And when I spoke a little while ago about being in that sandwich generation and how I was caring for my daughter at home. At that time, she was, she was probably about 12, and my dad came to live with me. And he was in his mid 60s, and he was very ill. I had 2 people in wheelchairs in the home. I was working, full time, trying to manage this so that I could get him into a healthy place where he eventually could go to senior living. And I had the flexibility with my job. Dell was great about that. Open communication with my manager saying, hey, I'm going to be late. I'm going to stay here and work late today because tomorrow I'm going to be a little late coming in the office. I got to take Dad for an appointment. So having that flexibility was key, but also having the thought that I had other people that I could reach out to. So utilizing some of the resources in that caregivers group, what are you guys doing? You have your, elderly parent at home. How are you going around and managing, their care and work and things? So being able to utilize that. Dell has a great EAP program. So I myself, being overwhelmed with everything that was going on in my world, being able to seek out a counselor and talk about what was going on with me, because I wasn't going to be good for my daughter or my father if I could not take care of myself. And thinking about, who's going to listen to me? Who's going to give me that kind of realistic approach? Because, I'm overwhelmed. I may not be thinking totally clearly or logically. So having the great benefits, being able to utilize some of those resources and our ERG for other support with employees, I think is very important. And I also think having that continued conversation around mental health is very important. It's on our radar. We're actually thinking about October when it's the National Employee
Disability Awareness Month.
Yes, thank you.
I'll just spit it out for you.
Spit it out for me. It's a big tongue twister.
It is.
But how we can utilize some of those days to provide more education around mental health, and sharing that information with all of our employees, so that if somebody may not know it's there, hey, this information's there, you can use it.
And I think one thing, I think there's many blessings that have come out of COVID-19 and the pandemic, and I'm certainly an obnoxiously optimistic person, but I really do. For example, I think that now it is okay for us to say, all right, so this is my reality. My reality as a human being. I'm dealing with my husband, I'm helping my daughter. I want to be a good employee, and everything I'm learning from everything I'm doing, I'm going to be more innovative. I think that people are now willing even more so because, you see Zoom calls where the dog runs through and the children. And I know there's been times when my husband will come walking in the room and it's like, I can turn around, and so we laugh because it happens all the time now. But I think something important shifted in that the employers are understanding they have human beings working for them, and human beings have complex lives, and things shift and change as we live our lives working for you. And you need to honor us as we work with you, and you need to support us. But at the same time, everything you do to support us, you're going to get back by happier employees that stay longer. You retain the talent. They're innovative, they're creative, they're productive. So I'm starting to see corporations get that. And I know there's a long way to go, but that's why when I reconnected with Dell after a few years not really tracking what you are doing, I was very impressed with all the progress that Dell had made, once again supporting their employees. So Kristine, I know I've kept you probably longer than I should, but let me give you the last words, but also will you please let the audience know how they can find out more about what Dell's doing and even connect with you via social media?
Yeah, so I'll be more than glad to give you my email address. It's Kristine.Biagiotti@Dell.com, and it's Kristine, and it's Biagiotti@Dell.com. I'm on Facebook, and I'd be more than glad to answer questions. If something from this has come up and you're more interested into knowing what we do. I wanted to add that Dell is a member of the Boston Chamber of Commerce, and they just started a business roundtable, and part of that is around caregiving. And I think Dell thought it was very important that we participated in that. So now we're active members with other corporations within the local community talking about what we can do to support our employees in that caregiving space. And one little antidote when you talked about the Zoom meetings and the dog and your husband, I think the best scenario was right when COVID started and we started on these Zoom calls, having a senior vice president have a call and have his dog chase his cat through the Zoom meeting. It was perfect because for everybody else who's got the little kids at home that are yelling and throwing toys and doing different things, everybody could see that he was just as human as the rest of us. And he got it because his cat and dog put on a show for us.
That's so funny. And you know what? I also want to do to shout out that I remember when Dell featured, me on Take Your Own Path, they also included me in another group you have, which is DWIN, which is Dell Women Entrepreneurial Network. And I love that Dell is supporting women and is supporting entrepreneurs, small businesses. So I really applaud Dell because they're really doing so much to support so many of us, and once again, all the intersectionalities of this as well. So I wanted to just do a shout out for Dwayne because I went to the first meeting. They selected 75 women, and we had a huge meeting in Shanghai, and it was really amazing. This was, I think, 2006 to 8, but I just was very impressed with how Dell didn't seem to be just, I'm a computer company, but we're building technology for human beings and really focusing on what does that mean and how do we use your technology and how can I use this technology, to do a better job for my employer, stay at home and things like that. So I've always been a fan of Dell, and speaking to you, I'm even more of a fan of Dell, but thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. And it's such a beautiful, powerful story, and, blessings to Kayla, and kudos to Dell. Kudos for Dell for supporting amazing people like you and really getting that they're building technology for human beings. So we appreciate them and look forward to hearing even more for Dell in the future. So thank you, Kristine. Thank you to the audience. And we'll make sure that we provide links. I'm going to ask Kristine to give me any links she wants to share so that you know about her work and about what they're doing at Dell, but also if you want to get in touch with her to ask her any questions. So thank you, Kristine, and thanks, everybody.